When the empire fell, it didn't vanish, it burned. In the ruins of a once golden kingdom, whispers of a lost heir and forbidden technology spark a desperate hunt for power. As soldiers, spies, and outlaws clash among the ashes, one question ignites them all. Will the next ruler rise from the blood of the fallen, or from the fire of rebellion? The sun hung low over the horizon as Marcus Valerius's carriage rumbled down the worn Via Sacra, the heart of Rome's ancient glory. The familiar sights, once symbols of imperial might, now bore the unmistakable scars of neglect and decay. Broken columns jutted from crumbled temples, their marble once gleaming, now dulled beneath layers of soot and dust. Vendors hawked their wares with a desperation that echoed through the narrow streets, while the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer rang out faintly, mingling with the murmurs of anxious citizens gathered in hushed clusters. Marcus's gaze was sharp, taking in every detail as the carriage slowed near the forum. The air was thick with the scent of stale smoke and the faint tank of refuse left unattended in the alleys. Even the sky seemed weighed down by a grey pall, as if the city itself mourned its own decline. His heart tightened with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. This was not the Rome of his youth, the eternal city of marble and conquest, but a shadow of its former self. He stepped down with measured dignity, his tall frame cutting a commanding figure amid the bustle. His silvering dark hair caught the fading light, and his sharp eyes swept the surroundings with a mixture of resolve and quiet grief. Nearby, a group of children darted between broken market stalls, their laughter a fragile defiance against the encroaching gloom. A servant awaited him at the carriage, bowing respectfully before leading the way to the Valerius family estate. The ancestral home stood at the edge of the Palatine Hill, its once proud facade now softened by age and the weight of unspoken anxieties. Inside, the atrium echoed with the hushed footsteps of those who awaited his return. Livia was the first to greet him, her composed grace a stark contrast to the unrest that rippled beneath her sharp dark eyes. "Marcus," she said quietly, her voice steady yet tinged with urgency, "Rome has changed since you left. We must change with it, or be consumed." Their son, Gaius, stood nearby, youthful and restless, his intense gaze locked on his father with a mixture of hope and challenge. "Father," he began, "the world we knew is gone. We cannot cling to old ways while enemies gather at our gates." Lucilla, Marcus's younger sister, appeared at the doorway, her delicate features calm but resolute. "We must not lose our honor," she pleaded softly. "In these times, our traditions are all that remain to guide us." The family gathered around the heavy oak table in the shadowed atrium, voices rising amid the flickering candlelight. Livia urged pragmatism, warning of the dangers in blind loyalty. Gaius spoke passionately of new alliances and rebellion against the decaying order. Marcus listened, torn between the weight of his heritage and the pressing realities unfolding before him. Outside, the city continued its uneasy rhythm. The Forum, once a stage for imperial triumph, now hummed with whispered conspiracies and cautious alliances. Marcus knew the Senate awaited him, a chamber rife with factionalism and fragile loyalties. As he prepared to face the political storm, the question gnawed at him: how could one preserve a legacy when the very foundations of the empire crumbled beneath their feet? That night, alone in a candlelit corridor, Marcus found himself drawn to an ancient mosaic depicting Rome's founding. His fingers traced the worn tesserae as memories flooded back lessons learned in rhetoric, governance, and the solemn duty to serve the Republic. The mosaic's faded colors mirrored the twilight of the empire itself, yet within him stirred a reluctant hope, a determination to navigate the perilous path ahead. The city's decay was undeniable, but so too was the resilience of those who remained. Marcus knew the road forward would be fraught with peril, betrayal, and sacrifice, but he would meet it with the steadfastness that had defined his family for generations. For in Rome's ashes, new fires might yet be kindled if only they could survive the coming storm. As dawn approached, the first murmurs of the Senate's awakening echoed through the city's stone corridors. Marcus steeled himself for the battles, both political and personal, that awaited. The empire's twilight demanded a reckoning, and the Valerius family stood at its uncertain heart. The Senate chamber was a vast hall of polished marble and towering columns, where sunlight fought to pierce through the high, narrow windows and cast long shadows across the mosaic floor. Marcus Valerius entered with measured steps, the heavy weight of the city's decline pressing upon his broad shoulders. The air inside was thick with tension, the murmurs of senators weaving a tapestry of suspicion and rivalry. It was a far cry from the days when Rome's Senate had convened with unity and purpose. Now, it was a battleground where old loyalties eroded beneath the relentless advance of ambition. Marcus's sharp eyes scanned the assembly, noting the familiar faces twisted by doubt and the new ones brimming with ruthless intent. At the center, Cassius Drusus sat like a hawk waiting to strike. His scarred face betrayed nothing, but his cold, calculating eyes flickered with a dangerous light. Beside him, Senator Flavius whispered incessantly, their conspiracy palpable to any who dared to look closely. As the session commenced, the chamber erupted in fervent debate. Voices clashed. Accusations hung in the air like poisoned daggers. Cassius seized the moment, sowing discord by casting aspersions on the loyalty of the traditional senators. He spoke with a venomous eloquence, painting them as relics incapable of adapting to Rome's new realities. His words dripped with menace, and many younger senators nodded in uneasy agreement. Marcus stepped forward, his stature commanding silence. His voice, calm but resolute, cut through the cacophony. He spoke not only of the Senate's storied past, but of the necessity to uphold Rome's foundational values amid chaos. His eloquence stirred some hearts, reminding them of a shared heritage worth preserving. Yet, even as a few senators exchanged approving glances, Marcus could feel the fragile web of loyalty unraveling. Between speeches, Marcus caught sight of Lucilla's faint nod from the gallery, a small gesture of encouragement that grounded him. But the sight of Livia's composed yet watchful gaze reminded him of the stakes beyond politics. Family survival depended on his ability to navigate these treacherous waters. The debates grew more heated. Senator Flavius openly challenged Marcus, accusing him of clinging to obsolete ideals that endangered Rome's future. The chamber buzzed with whispers and side conversations, alliances shifting like shadows. Cassius, ever the puppeteer, smiled thinly as his plans took root. Marcus felt the weight of history pressing upon his conscience. He was a guardian of Rome's fading glory, yet the forces arrayed against him were relentless. As the session drew to a close, the Senate was no longer a place of governance, but an arena of survival, where every word could tilt the balance between honor and ruin. Outside the chamber, the sun dipped lower, casting the city in a golden haze that belied the darkness within. Marcus walked slowly, the echoes of the day's conflict ringing in his ears. He knew that the shadows within the Senate were only the beginning. The true test lay ahead, whether tradition could endure the ruthless tide of change. In the quiet of his chambers that evening, Marcus penned notes and speeches, seeking to rally his allies for the battles yet to come. The flickering candlelight danced upon his face, revealing lines of worry etched deep by sleepless nights and relentless struggle. Yet beneath the weariness, a spark of reluctant hope remained, a belief that even in Rome's twilight, the flame of loyalty and honor might yet burn bright. As darkness enveloped the city, Marcus's thoughts turned to his family. The fractures that loomed within their household mirrored those tearing through the empire. He resolved to hold fast, to be the steadfast rock amid the rising storm. But he could not ignore the creeping fear that the shadows of the Senate would soon engulf them all. The chapter closed on Marcus's somber reflection, the weight of his duty heavier than ever. The Senate's corridors whispered of betrayal, ambition, and survival. And in that uncertain twilight, Marcus Valerius stood at a crossroads, his every choice a step into the unknown. The Valerius family atrium was heavy with a silence that was anything but peaceful. Marcus Valerius sat at the head of the vast wooden table, its surface scarred by years of use, worn smooth in places where hands had rested during moments of counsel and debate. Around him, the family Livia, Gaius, and Lucilla gathered beneath the flickering light of oil lamps, whose smoke curled toward the vaulted ceiling like the uncertain fate of the empire itself. Marcus's eyes, sharp and contemplative, traced the lines on the scroll before him, maps of provinces now fraught with unrest and barbarians pressing at the borders. Yet his mind was elsewhere, caught between the ideals he had sworn to uphold and the grim realities that encroached relentlessly upon Rome. Livia Valeria, seated beside him, regarded Marcus with a calm that masked the steel beneath. Her dark eyes reflected the flickering flames as she spoke, her voice low but firm. "Marcus, we can no longer afford the luxury of idealism. The Senate fractures, the barbarians gather strength, and our enemies plot in shadows. We must adapt, or we will perish." Marcus met her gaze, the weight of her words settling like a leaden cloak around his shoulders. "Adaptation must not mean surrender to chaos, Livia. There is honor in perseverance. The legacy of Rome is not so easily cast aside." Gaius, the youthful son whose restless energy had long been a source of both hope and concern, could no longer contain his impatience. Rising abruptly, he strode to the open window, the cool night air stirring his dark hair as he looked out upon the city he both loved and despised. "Legacy," he demanded, voice ringing with youthful fervor. "The legacy you cherish is dying. The Senate is corrupt, the people fearful, and the gods silent. We must seize the future, even if it means breaking with the past." His words hung in the air, a challenge and a provocation that stirred unease among those gathered. Lucilla, the youngest and most gentle of the family, rose quietly to stand beside her brother. Her delicate features softened by candlelight, she spoke with a voice that was both tender and resolute. "We must not lose ourselves in desperation. Mercy and honor must guide us, even now. The gods may seem distant, but their silence is a test of our faith and our will." The room fell silent as each member grappled with the weight of their convictions. Marcus's heart ached with the knowledge that the bonds holding them together were fraying, torn by conflicting visions of what survival might demand. "Gaius," Marcus said at last, voice steady though heavy with sorrow, "your zeal is admirable, but recklessness will bring ruin. The empire's fall is not a call to abandon all we hold dear, but a summons to preserve what we can, with honor intact." Gaius's eyes flashed with defiance. "Honor will not fill empty granaries or protect our homes from the barbarians. If we do not act, we are doomed." Livia leaned forward, her fingers interlacing over the table. "Then we must find a middle path. Alliances with new powers, concessions that preserve our family, even if it means sacrifices we would rather not make. Lucilla's gaze fell to the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. But at what cost? Are we to become the very shadows we fear, losing ourselves in the process? The evening stretched on, voices rising and falling, the clash of ideals echoing in the ancient walls. Outside, the city of Rome breathed unevenly, its streets whispering of decay and unrest, while within the Valerius home, the family faced a crossroads that would determine their fate. Marcus knew that the decisions made tonight would ripple far beyond their household. The empire was dying, and with it, the world they had known. Yet, in the midst of despair, a reluctant hope lingered that, perhaps, through sacrifice and adaptation, some fragment of Rome's greatness might endure. As the lamps guttered low and the night deepened, Marcus's thoughts drifted to the uncertain dawn. The path ahead was shrouded in shadows, but he resolved to walk it with steadfast heart, even if it meant walking alone. The family's voices faded into the night, leaving behind a silence pregnant with both fear and possibility. The crossroads had been reached. Now the journey must begin. Marcus Valerius had always believed that Rome, for all its cracks and crumbling pillars, held onto a core of unyielding tradition. Yet, as he stepped back into the marble halls of the Senate, the air was thick with whispers not of loyalty, but of subterfuge. The city's decay was no longer just in the crumbling aqueducts or the neglected temples. It seeped into the very veins of its governing body. That evening, as dusk settled over the city, Marcus found himself lingering near the Senate's outer chambers, where hushed voices slipped through the heavy drapes. His sharp ears caught fragments names of barbarian chieftains, secret trysts, and promises made under the cloak of night. Cassius Drusus's name surfaced repeatedly, entwined with the mention of these foreign powers. The senator's usual cold demeanor was now shadowed by a dangerous alliance, one that threatened to unravel the fragile balance of power in Rome. Back at the ancestral home, the Valerius villa was a sanctuary and a battlefield in equal measure. Livia Valeria, ever the pragmatist, moved with quiet purpose through the dimly lit corridors. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned parchments and letters spread across a heavy oak table. She dialed numbers, sent discreet messages through trusted servants, and engaged in subtle manipulations of Senate factions. Her voice was calm, but beneath it lay the steel of desperation to protect her husband and their family's legacy. Each calculated move was a thread in a web she wove to catch the ever-tightening noose of Cassius's ambitions. Meanwhile, Gaius Valerius could not conceal his growing restlessness. The weight of his father's ideals felt like chains binding him to a dying world. Under the twilight sky, in the shadowed alleys near the Forum, he met with Julia, his childhood confidant and voice of encouragement. Her merchant family background gave her a perspective different from the senatorial elite, and together they dreamed aloud of a future unfettered by ancient Rome's fading grandeur. Gaius's words were bold, laced with urgency and impatience, as he spoke of alliances with the barbarians, not as enemies, but as potential partners in survival. His rebellion was not mere youthful defiance. It was a calculated gamble to forge a new path amid the ashes. In the shadowed alcoves of political power, Cassius Drusus convened with his loyal senators and emissaries. His scarred face was a mask of ruthless ambition, cold eyes glinting with satisfaction. He outlined plans to leverage his barbarian alliances to purge traditionalist senators and seize control of the Senate. Every word dripped with calculated menace, a vision of Rome reshaped under his iron will. To him, the old empire was a relic to be dismantled and rebuilt stronger, no matter the cost. The discoveries Marcus made pressed heavily on his conscience. The betrayal was not just political, but deeply personal. He wrestled with the knowledge that his son's secret negotiations could be both a salvation and a curse for their family. The villa, once a place of refuge, now echoed with tension as each member grappled with their choices. Livia's covert manipulations, Gaius's rebellious alliances, and Marcus's own struggle to hold on to fading ideals created a tempest that threatened to consume them all. As night deepened, Marcus stood on the balcony overlooking the forum, the distant fires of unrest flickering like dying stars. The whispers of betrayal were no longer just rumors, but clear and present dangers. His voice, usually measured and thoughtful, was filled with quiet resolve as he vowed to navigate the treacherous tides ahead. Yet beneath that resolve lay an uneasy question. How much of their heritage must they sacrifice to survive? The chapter closed on a note of simmering tension, with the Valerius family poised on the edge of irrevocable change. The shadows lengthened, and the whispers grew louder, promising that the coming days would test their loyalties, their courage, and their very souls. The sun dipped low over the Roman horizon, casting a muted orange glow across the city's ancient stones. Marcus Valerius stood upon the balcony of his ancestral home, his sharp eyes tracing the jagged silhouette of the crumbling walls that had long stood as Rome's bulwark against the world beyond. As twilight deepened, a distant haunting horn echoed from the northern frontier, a grim reminder that the barbarians were stirring once more. The reports had come in steadily, each carrying darker tidings than the last. Increased raids, more frequent skirmishes, and a growing sense of boldness among the tribes that once skulked in the wilderness. Praetor Maximus, the empire's seasoned military commander, had returned from the front with grave news. The once formidable border defenses were stretched thin, and the legions, weakened by years of internal strife and neglect, struggled to maintain their grip. Marcus turned from the balcony as the heavy footsteps of Tiberius approached. The trusted officer's face, weathered from countless campaigns, bore the same stern expression that Marcus had come to recognize as a mirror to his own unease. The latest dispatch, Tiberius began, handing over a sealed scroll, reports a raid near the province of Raetia. The barbarians struck swiftly, pillaging farms and villages before retreating. The legions were slow to respond. Marcus broke the seal, his fingers trembling slightly as he unfolded the parchment. Raetia, it seems the cracks in our defenses deepen by the day. Tiberius nodded grimly. Maximus fears this is but the beginning. The tribes are uniting under stronger leaders, emboldened by Rome's distractions here in the Senate. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon Marcus. As a senator and former provincial governor, he knew all too well the political tensions that sapped Rome's strength. Yet, the military realities were impossible to ignore. Later that evening, Praetor Maximus arrived at the Valerius estate. His presence was commanding, his armor battered but meticulously maintained, a testament to the relentless campaigns he had endured. Marcus, Maximus greeted, his voice low but urgent. The barbarians grow bolder. Our forces are stretched thin, and the Senate's infighting hampers decisive action. Marcus listened intently as Maximus detailed the precarious situation along the northern borders. We face not merely raids, but an emerging threat that could unravel what remains of the empire's hold. In the dim light of the atrium, the Valerius family convened. Livia, ever pragmatic, voiced her concerns plainly. Our political enemies exploit this chaos. We must consider alliances beyond the Senate's walls if we are to survive. Lucilla, her delicate features shadowed by worry, countered softly, "And what of Rome's honor? Our gods? Are we to forsake all that defines us? The room fell into tense silence. The clash between tradition and survival hung palpable in the air. Marcus met his sister's gaze. The empire's foundations crumble. Lucilla, we stand at a crossroads. As night deepened, the distant sounds of the city hushed whispers in the marble halls. The faint clatter of soldiers preparing for uncertain days reminded them all that Rome's twilight was no longer a distant threat, but an encroaching reality. Throughout the night, Marcus wrestled with the balance between political ideals and the harsh demands of military necessity. The barbarians' encroachments were not merely a test of arms, but a challenge to the very soul of Rome. Would steadfast loyalty to tradition lead to ruin? Or would pragmatic adaptation betray the legacy they sought to preserve? The answers remained elusive as the first light of dawn crept over the city, illuminating a Rome caught between decay and the desperate hope for survival.